My dear reader, autumn is upon us. A season of harvesting and brewing up all kinds of goods in my farmhouse kitchen. We woke up on the first autumn day to a cracking house and a wind coming in from the leaky windows and finding us under the covers. September is here, and so is the murky rain, the fog, and the warm winds. Autumn is one of my favorite seasons. It brings with it equal amounts of coziness and Halloween horror, and I love both equally. And what better character to embody this scared coziness than the witch? In some stories she is a mad woman, living alone in the woods. In others, she is a cute girl solving crimes with her friends. The witch encapsulates the season of autumn like no other character, and I love her for it. For this autumn, I have been leaning into my obsession with witches and have been brewing all sorts of things in my little cottage kitchen. So pour yourself a warm cup of tea from the bubbling kettle, and let me tell you of all the things that are bubbling and brewing in my kitchen for this month of September. My no-nonsense sourdough starter. For this autumn I wanted to make sure I told you all about my own no-nonsense recipe for sourdough, as I know I will be making and sharing a lot of sourdough recipes for all of autumn and winter. I think we tend to make sourdough a lot harder than it is. Actually, it's really simple once you get the hang of it. Water plus flour plus air equals sourdough. The main things you need to know besides that is that sourdough needs to be fed enough flour plus water to at least double its size, and that unless your sourdough has literal mold on it, it is not dead. Sourdough can smell very funny, have weird looking water on top, even black water. It all just means that it is hungry and needs a healthy amount of water and flour. The older your sourdough is and the more you use it, the better it will be. So if you have not one already, there is no better time to start it than now. When starting my own sourdough, I mixed 2 deciliters of all-purpose flours with about 1.5 deciliter water with a wooden spoon and then let it sit till next day with the lid loosely on. I then take 2 deciliters of sourdough starter away and use it, like here, for sourdough starter pancakes. Feed the remaining sourdough starter again with 2 deciliter all-purpose flours and 1.5 deciliter water, and I repeated these steps for 3 to 5 days or until I had a bubbling sourdough starter. You can leave it in the fridge when it is not in use, where it can last up till a month without being used or fed. And now for the sourdough starter pancakes. I make these pancakes several times in the week. We all love them. They are super easy and quick to make. This recipe contains baking powder, so an active sourdough is not an requirement. In fact, it's a great way to use inactive sourdough in between feedings or when you are starting a sourdough. At first I mash 1 banana with a fork, and then I whip together the mashed banana, 1 egg, 1 teaspoon of vanilla and baking powder. I then pour in my sourdough starter, about 2 deciliters, and melt about 2 tablespoons of butter on my pan and pour that in as well. And I fold it all until it is a combined dough. On the same pan that is now warm and covered in melted butter, I pour the dough 1 tablespoon at a time to make small pancakes. And I flip the pancakes after about a minute or so when the bubbles start to burst on the surface. You can serve it with syrup, honey, sugar, whipped cream, ice or berries, but I usually just go with syrup. I also wanted to share an apple cider recipe with you. Our 2 apple trees have been brimming with golden apples this season, so when my father-in-law lent us a juicer, I knew I had to get apple cider another go. Last year was a disaster. I'm still fairly new to brewing, so I'm still very much experimenting with different methods, but for this year we opted for a simple method. We washed the apples straight from the outside in clear water and cut them up so they will fit in our juicer. We then juice everything and pour the juice through a sieve and a clean cloth to avoid any foam or impurities. We pour the juice into a container with an airlock and let it sit on the kitchen counter for a couple of days. If the water in the airlock has not started to bubble after 2 days, mix a bit of cider yeast with water, pour it in and mix it in with the juice to kickstart the fermenting process. Next up is letting it bubble for about 10 days until the bubbling has slowed down a bit. Then gently pour it into another container while you clean the glass flask of any yeast in the bottom. Pour the juice back and let it sit for another 10 days. Pour the apple cider onto champagne bottles that do not easily break upon pressure, or glass bottles that are kept in the fridge and opened once every day to let out pressure. Taste the cider after 3 days and drink it if the bubbling and sweetness is to your liking, or leave it even longer for more bubbles and a higher alcohol percent. The last recipe is the elderberry red wine recipe. Prior 2 years, I have been experimenting with making elderberry wine with bought red wine yeast, but I have not been completely satisfied with the results. This year I have had great success with my elderflower champagne in June and using natural yeast, so adding nothing to get the ferment process going. So for this year's elderberry wine, I wanted to see if I could replicate that. I cut about 20 elderberry cuttings that had juicy and dark elderberries. I then washed them off in water and used a fork to remove the berries. With my hands I smushed the berries in a large container, and I did forget to add 2 washed and sliced lemon, but I did add them later. I then melted the sugar in 1 liter of warm water and poured in the rest 1 liter cold water. The water and melted sugar should not be poured hot onto the elderberries, as this will kill the natural yeast in the berries. When the melted sugar and water combo had cooled on, I poured onto the smashed berries and mixed well. I then put a cloth over my bowl and let it sit for 2 days. And when the bubbles were plenty, I put the mixture through a sieve and a clean cloth and poured the juice onto a glass flask with an airlock. I left it to bubble off completely, and this might take 2 to 3 months, and then I would pour it onto another glass flask and leave it till next year. After a year or so, when there are no more bubbles, I would pour the wine onto a glass flask again and drink them immediately or let them age even longer than that. So, what have I been watching lately? Wicked. I'm not joking when I said that it was the movie Wicked that gave me the idea to self-publish my books. An idea that I am still sitting with and slowly finding out what to do with. The lyrics of Defying Gravity have been stuck in my head for months. I'm through with playing by the rules of someone else's games. Need I say more? Maleficent. I was well into my witch-watching spree when I decided to rewatch Maleficent and was pleasantly surprised. Especially the first act was very well told, and Angelina Jolie was perfect as the role of the evil fairy. However, the other 3 good fairies did not fit well into the otherwise beautiful but damed story and settings, in my opinion, but the rest of it I loved. Kiki's Delivery Service. One of my all-time favorite witches is Kiki from the animation studio Ghibli. I have been rewatching it with my 3-year-old, and we have both been loving it. Kiki's story is one of finding her own witch path and dealing with burnout and creative stiffness. It is a story that speaks right to me. Book of October. For next month, the month of October, I thought it would be fun if we could all read the same book. I could then give you my 2 cents in my letter to you. I do hold a master degree in literature after all, and we could discuss further in the comments. For our first read, I thought we should read something light and cozy, and since I've been craving some classic children's book, the book of October will be The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. I hope you will join me next month for another seasonal letter. Much love and a warm and witchy September from me, Anne of Baggebo.